The jagged scar that ran from Olivia Zimmer's temple to her jaw caught the dying light of the sunset as she peered out the stage coach window, her heart pounding against her ribs like a wild Mustang. She wasn't just fleeing Omaha, she was running for her life, away from the man who had marked her both physically and mentally with a cruelty that still haunted her dreams. The year was 1876, and somewhere in the vast expanse of Nevada territory lay the promise of a new beginning, if only she could reach it before he found her again. The stagecoach hit a particularly jarring rut, jolting Olivia from her thoughts and causing the elderly woman seated across from her to make a small sound of discomfort. "They say we'll reach Winnemucca by nightfall, dear," the woman said, adjusting her bonnet with gnarled fingers. "Nevada's a good place for new beginnings." Olivia forced a smile but kept her scarred side turned away, a habit she'd developed over the past year. "I certainly hope so, madam." What she didn't say was that Winnemucca was as far as her dwindling funds would take her. After that, she would have to find work quickly, though with her face as it was, she knew options would be limited. Her fingers unconsciously traced the raised line of tissue that had once been smooth skin, before Gregory Wilcox had decided to teach her a lesson about rejection with the blade of his hunting knife. The stagecoach driver's voice called down from above, "Winnemucca station ahead, folks. We'll be arriving in 10 minutes. The sun had nearly disappeared behind the mountains when the stagecoach rolled into the small but bustling town. Main Street was lined with wooden buildings, a few saloons still lit and lively despite the hour. Olivia stepped down carefully from the coach, clutching her single carpet bag to her chest like a shield. "Miss," the driver handed down her other small trunk. "The Silver Dollar Hotel is just down the street if you're needing accommodations." Olivia thanked him quietly, pulling her shawl higher to partially obscure her face as she made her way down the dusty street. Men stumbled in and out of saloons, their raucous laughter making her flinch. She quickened her pace, eyes downcast, painfully aware of the stares that followed her. Even in the fading light, the scar was visible enough to draw attention. The Silver Dollar Hotel was a modest two-story building with peeling white paint. Inside, the lobby smelled of pine soap and tobacco. The proprietress, a stout woman with graying hair pulled into a severe bun, barely glanced up from her ledger as Olivia approached the desk. "Rooms 50 cents a night, $1 if you want meals included," she stated flatly. "I'll take 3 nights with meals, please," Olivia said, carefully counting out the coins from her dwindling purse. "And might I ask if you know of any employment opportunities in town?" The woman looked up then, her eyes lingering briefly on Olivia's scar before returning to her ledger. "Laundry's always hiring, so's the Midnight Saloon if you've got the temperament for serving drinks to miners and cowboys." Olivia nodded, taking the key the woman slid across the counter. "Thank you. Room 203 up the stairs and to your right. Breakfast is served from 6 to 8. Alone in her small, sparse room, Olivia finally allowed her shoulders to slump. She set her bags down and moved to the small mirror hanging on the wall. Slowly, deliberately, she turned her face to fully view her reflection. The scar seemed more pronounced in the yellow lamplight, a jagged line that pulled slightly at her right eye and twisted the corner of her mouth. Gregory had wanted to ensure she'd never forget him, never be able to hide what he'd done. She touched the damaged skin, tears welling in her eyes. At 22, she'd once had dreams of marriage and family. Now she could barely look strangers in the eye. 3 days, she whispered to her reflection. 3 days to find work and a new life. What she didn't say aloud was the fear that constantly gnawed at her, that Gregory would follow her trail. He'd promised as much the last time she'd seen him, as she lay bleeding on the floor of what had once been her parents' home. "You'll never be free of me, Olivia," he'd hissed. "That pretty face of yours will always be mine now." Olivia shuddered at the memory. She splashed water on her face from the basin, changed into her night clothes, and blew out the lamp. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but for tonight, at least, she was safe. The morning sun streamed through the thin curtains, waking Olivia earlier than she'd intended. She dressed quickly in her plainest dress, a practical brown cotton with minimal adornments, and pinned her dark hair in a simple style that allowed a few strategic strands to fall across her right cheek. It wasn't much of a disguise, but it helped her feel less exposed. Breakfast in the small dining room was a quiet affair. A few traveling businessmen occupied one table while an older couple sat near the window. Olivia kept her head down, focusing on her plate of eggs and toast. She'd learned that drawing attention to herself only led to uncomfortable stares or pitying glances, neither of which she could bear. After finishing her meal, she gathered her courage and approached the proprietress, who was tallying receipts at a small desk in the corner. "Excuse me, madam. Could you direct me to the laundry you mentioned?" The woman looked up, squinting at Olivia through small spectacles. "2 blocks east past the general store. Ask for Mrs. Patterson." Olivia nodded her thanks and stepped out into the already warm morning. Winnemucca was more active by daylight. Freight wagons rumbled down the main street, storekeepers swept their boardwalks, and children darted between buildings on mysterious errands. The Nevada sky stretched endlessly blue above the modest town, giving Olivia her first real sense of the vastness of this new territory. The laundry was easy to find, announced by billowing white sheets hanging on lines behind a squat building with steam pouring from its windows. The heat hit Olivia like a wall when she entered, along with the sharp smell of lye soap and the sounds of women chattering as they worked over massive tubs and scrubbing boards. Mrs. Patterson proved to be a thin, wiry woman with arms corded with muscle from years of wringing clothes. Her eyes flickered briefly to Olivia's scar before meeting her gaze directly. "Ever worked laundry before?" she asked, wiping her hands on her apron. "No, madam, but I'm a quick learner and not afraid of hard work." Mrs. Patterson nodded appraisingly. 6 days a week, sunup to sundown. Pays $2 a week, not a penny more. You can start tomorrow if you've a mind to. It wasn't much, but it would keep a roof over her head and food in her stomach. Olivia accepted gratefully and turned to leave when Mrs. Patterson called after her. "Girl," she said, her voice softer than before. "Whatever trouble you're running from, and don't bother denying it, I've seen that look before. Just know that Winnemucca's got its share of decent folk. Mind yourself, work hard, and you might find what you're looking for here." Startled by the unexpected kindness, Olivia could only nod before hurrying back out into the relative cool of the street. With employment secured, she allowed herself a moment of relief. The wages were meager, but they would be enough for a small room somewhere cheaper than the hotel. As she walked back toward the center of town, intent on inquiring about more permanent lodgings, a commotion ahead drew her attention. A horse had broken free from its hitching post and was rearing in the middle of the street, sending pedestrians scattering. In the chaos, Olivia didn't notice the man backing up toward her until they collided, sending her stumbling backward. "Whoa there." Strong hands caught her before she could fall. "Sorry about that, miss. That fool horse has everyone jumping." Olivia quickly regained her balance and pulled away, instinctively turning her scarred side from view. "No harm done," she murmured, keeping her eyes downcast, but the man didn't immediately move on. "You're new in town," he observed. Not a question. Reluctantly, Olivia looked up. The man before her was tall and lean, with sun-bronzed skin that spoke of long days outdoors. He wore the practical clothes of a working rancher or cowboy: sturdy denims, a faded blue shirt with the sleeves rolled to the elbows, and a wide-brimmed hat that shaded eyes the color of a summer storm. His face was neither classically handsome nor plain, but striking in its openness, with laugh lines crinkling at the corners of those gray eyes. "Yes," she admitted. "Just arrived yesterday. Samuel Reeves," he said, tipping his hat slightly. "Everyone calls me Sam. I run the Double R Ranch about 10 miles outside of town." "Olivia Zimmer," she replied automatically, then immediately regretted giving her real name. If Gregory came looking for her. The horse in the street gave another wild neigh, and Sam glanced over his shoulder. "Excuse me, Miss Zimmer. Looks like Thornton could use some help with that gelding before someone gets trampled." With a quick nod, he strode into the street, approaching the panicked horse with confident, measured steps. Olivia watched, momentarily forgetting her self-consciousness as Sam spoke in low, soothing tones to the animal, gradually calming it enough to take hold of its reins. "That man has a way with the wildest creatures," said a voice beside her. Olivia turned to find an older man with a magnificent white mustache watching the scene. Been that way since he was a boy. Sam Reeves could gentle a mountain lion if he put his mind to it. Before Olivia could respond, the man tipped his hat and continued on his way, leaving her to ponder this small insight into the rancher who'd quite literally bumped into her life. She watched as Sam handed the now docile horse back to its red-faced owner, saying something that made the other man laugh despite his obvious embarrassment. For a moment, their eyes met across the street, and Sam gave her a small smile and another tip of his hat before turning away to continue his business in town. Olivia hurried on, suddenly aware that in watching him, she'd forgotten to hide her face. The next few days fell into a grueling pattern. Olivia rose before dawn, ate a quick breakfast at the modest boarding house where she'd found a room for $3 a month, and then walked to the laundry. The work was exactly as difficult as she'd expected: endless hours of scrubbing, wringing, hanging, and folding, all in stifling heat that left her clothes damp with sweat and her hands raw, despite the protective salve Mrs. Patterson provided. But there was a simple satisfaction in the labor, and the other women, while curious about her past, respected her reticence. "That's some scar you got there," one of the younger women, Mary, had commented on Olivia's second day. "Husband do that to you, Mary, Mrs. Patterson had barked from across the room. "Mind your own business and those sheets you're folding. They look like they were wrestled by bears instead of pressed proper." The subject hadn't been raised again directly, though Olivia occasionally caught sympathetic glances from the older women. She kept to herself during breaks, eating her simple lunch of bread and cheese in the small yard behind the laundry, watching the distant mountains and allowing herself to believe, if only for moments at a time, that she might actually be safe here. It was during one such lunch break, nearly 2 weeks after her arrival in Winnemucca, that she saw Sam Reeves again. She'd found a quiet spot beneath a cottonwood tree, enjoying the rare shade when the sound of approaching horses drew her attention. A small group of riders was coming down the main street, dust billowing around their mounts. Even at a distance, she recognized Sam's straight-backed posture and broad shoulders. The riders dismounted outside the general store, and while the others went inside, Sam remained with the horses, adjusting something on his saddle. Olivia found herself watching him, admiring the efficient way he moved, the gentle manner he had even with the animals. There was something compelling about him that went beyond physical appearance, a steadiness, a quiet confidence that seemed rare in a world where men often felt the need to prove themselves through bluster and bravado. As if sensing her gaze, Sam suddenly looked up, scanning the street until his eyes found her in the shadowy spot beneath the tree. A smile broke across his face, and he raised a hand in greeting. Embarrassed at being caught staring, Olivia gave a small wave in return before quickly gathering her things and heading back to work, her heart inexplicably beating faster than the heat of the day warranted. "That's Sam Reeves looking at you," Mary whispered when Olivia returned to her washtub. "Half the unmarried women in Humboldt County have set their caps for him, but he doesn't seem to notice any of them." "I'm sure I don't know what you're talking about," Olivia replied primly, plunging her hands back into the soapy water. "I only met the man once briefly." Mary raised an eyebrow knowingly, but said nothing more as Mrs. Patterson approached with another load of miner's work clothes to be scrubbed. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of steam and soap, but Olivia found her thoughts repeatedly returning to the rancher and his kind smile. It had been a long time since a man had looked at her with anything but revulsion or unwanted pity, and longer still since she'd allowed herself to think of any man with interest. Not since Gregory had turned from charming suitor to possessive monster had she permitted herself such thoughts. As she walked back to her boarding house that evening, weary to her bones but satisfied with a day's honest work, Olivia passed the general store just as Sam and his men were preparing to leave town. He spotted her immediately, and to her surprise, he handed his reins to one of his companions and walked over to where she stood. "Miss Zimmer," he said, removing his hat, "I was hoping I might run into you again." Up close, She could see the fine lines etched around his eyes from years squinting against the Nevada sun, and the small scar that cut through his right eyebrow. His hands, when they weren't holding his hat, moved expressively as he spoke, strong and calloused from ranch work. "Mr. Reeves," she acknowledged, fighting the urge to turn her scarred side away from him. "You remembered my name, of course." His smile was genuine, reaching his eyes. "We don't get many newcomers in Winnemucca that stay more than a night or two, especially not." He seemed to catch himself, pausing briefly. "Well, not many young ladies on their own." Olivia tensed slightly. "I've found employment at the laundry. So I heard. Mrs. Patterson runs a fair business." He glanced back at his men, who were pointedly not watching their exchange while obviously curious about it. "I don't mean to keep you, especially after a long day's work, but I wanted to mention that my sister is hosting a small gathering this Saturday evening. Nothing fancy, just some neighbors and friends for supper and perhaps some music afterward. I'd be pleased if you'd consider attending." The invitation caught Olivia entirely off guard. She hadn't socialized since the attack, had deliberately avoided situations where she might be the center of attention or subject to curious stares. "That's very kind, but I couldn't possibly." "Before you refuse," Sam interrupted gently, "let me say that it would be a good opportunity to meet some of the townsfolk in a more comfortable setting. Winnemucca's small enough that newcomers are noticed, but sometimes folks need a proper introduction before they welcome you into the fold." Olivia hesitated, her mind racing with conflicting thoughts. On one hand, remaining as inconspicuous as possible seemed wisest if she wanted to avoid Gregory potentially finding her. On the other, building connections in this new place might provide her with protection and support should he ever appear. Sam seemed to sense her internal struggle. "My sister's place is just on the edge of town, the white house with the blue shutters and the big oak tree in the yard, around 6 o'clock if you decide to come." He settled his hat back on his head. "No pressure, Miss Zimmer, just an open invitation." With a respectful nod, he returned to his waiting men, mounting his horse with the easy grace of someone who'd spent more time in the saddle than out of it. As the group rode out of town, one of the other cowboys said something that made Sam glance back at Olivia once more before they disappeared in a cloud of dust. That night, as Olivia prepared for bed in her small room at the boarding house, she found herself standing before the mirror longer than usual. Typically, she avoided her reflection as much as possible, looking only long enough to ensure her hair was properly pinned and her clothes presentable. Now she studied her face with a critical eye. The scar was still angry and red, though less inflamed than it had been months ago when it was fresh. It started just below her hairline at the right temple, curved across her cheekbone, and ended at her jawline. Gregory had been careful not to cut too deeply. He hadn't wanted to kill her, only mark her as his. The doctor in Omaha had done his best, but without money for a specialist, this was the face she would wear for the rest of her life. Yet tonight, for the first time in a year, Olivia forced herself to look beyond the scar to the woman she still was. Her eyes remained the same deep brown, framed by long lashes. Her other features, the straight nose, the full lips, the gentle curve of her jawline on the left side, were unchanged. The scar had not erased her, merely added an unwanted chapter to her story. "You're being foolish," she told her reflection sternly. "One kind man shows you basic courtesy, and suddenly you're contemplating social gatherings." She shook her head at herself. "The last thing you need is to draw attention." But even as she turned away from the mirror and climbed into bed, a small voice in the back of her mind whispered that perhaps isolation wasn't the answer, that perhaps in this dusty Nevada town, she might find more than just a hiding place. Perhaps she might find a home. The thought both terrified and exhilarated her. Saturday arrived with alarming swiftness, and Olivia still hadn't decided whether to accept Sam's invitation. She worked mechanically through the morning at the laundry, her thoughts distant as she scrubbed and rinsed seemingly endless piles of clothing. "You've washed that same shirt 3 times now," Mrs. Patterson observed, appearing suddenly at Olivia's side. "Something on your mind, girl." Olivia blinked down at the now immaculate shirt in her hands. "I'm sorry, I was distracted." The older woman's sharp eyes softened slightly. "Wouldn't have anything to do with Sam Reeves asking you to his sister's gathering tonight, would it?" Startled, Olivia looked up. "How did you small town?" Mrs. Patterson said with a shrug. "News travels faster than telegrams around here." She took the shirt from Olivia's hands and placed it in the rinse basket. "You should go." "I don't think that would be wise," Olivia replied quietly. I don't." "Because of that," Mrs. Patterson gestured toward Olivia's scar. "Girl, everyone's got scars. Some are just more visible than others." Before Olivia could respond, Mrs. Patterson continued, "Sarah Reeves, that's Sam's sister, she lost her husband 2 years back in a mining accident. Raised 3 children on her own since then, runs her household with grace despite her grief. Sam moved back from his ranch to be near her after it happened, built himself a place just outside town so he could help while still managing his own affairs." She fixed Olivia with a pointed look. "Good people, the Reeves family, not the sort to judge a book by its cover." With that, she moved away to supervise Mary, who was struggling with a particularly stubborn stain on a miner's shirt. Olivia stood motionless, absorbing Mrs. Patterson's words and the implicit encouragement they contained. When work ended that afternoon, Olivia returned to her boarding house and stared at the meager contents of her wardrobe. She owned exactly 3 dresses: the brown work dress she wore daily to the laundry, a slightly better blue cotton for Sundays, and the simple but once elegant green silk she'd worn on her journey from Omaha. It was the only remnant of her former life, before everything had changed. With trembling fingers, she laid the green dress on her bed. It would be too formal for a casual supper, but with her blue shawl draped over her shoulders, perhaps it wouldn't appear too out of place. She washed carefully with her precious sliver of lavender soap, pinned her dark hair in a simple but becoming style, and then, before she could lose her nerve, put on the green dress. The woman who looked back at her from the small mirror was a stranger part of the girl she'd once been in Omaha, part of the scarred woman she'd become. The green brought out flecks of gold in her brown eyes and complemented her olive complexion. The dress itself still fit perfectly, highlighting her slender waist and graceful neck, and the scar, well, the scar was still there, impossible to ignore. But somehow, in the warm light of the setting sun streaming through her window, it seemed less defining than it had before. "You can always leave if it becomes uncomfortable," she told herself, wrapping the blue shawl around her shoulders. "Just an hour, meet a few people, thank the hostess, and then excuse yourself." The white house with blue shutters was easy to find, situated on a corner lot at the eastern edge of town. As Olivia approached, she could hear laughter and the strumming of a guitar drifting from the open windows. Lanterns had been hung from the branches of the massive oak tree, creating pools of golden light across the front yard where several children played a game of tag. Her courage nearly failed her at the front steps. She paused, 1 foot on the bottom stair, contemplating a hasty retreat. But before she could turn away, the front door opened and Sam Reeves himself appeared in the doorway. "Miss Zimmer," he said, his face lighting up with a genuine smile. "I was beginning to think you might not come." His obvious pleasure at seeing her bolstered Olivia's resolve. "I apologize for being late. I needed some time to prepare." Sam stepped onto the porch, closing the door slightly behind him to create a moment of privacy away from the gathering inside. "Before we join the others, I wanted to thank you for coming. I know it couldn't have been an easy decision." Something in his tone made Olivia look up sharply. "What do you mean?" He gestured vaguely toward his own face. "Folks can be curious about things they don't understand. Scars have stories behind them, and some people feel entitled to those stories without earning the right to hear them." His gray eyes held her steadily. "You won't find that kind of entitlement here tonight. I made sure of it." A lump formed in Olivia's throat at this unexpected consideration. He had not only anticipated her discomfort but had taken steps to ease it. "Thank you," she managed. Sam offered his arm. "Shall we? My sister Sarah has been eager to meet you, and I promise her cooking is worth whatever social awkwardness you might endure." With a small nod, Olivia placed her hand lightly on his offered arm, allowing him to guide her into the warmth and light of the house. The gathering was larger than Olivia had anticipated. Perhaps 20 people filled the comfortable front parlor and dining room. Conversation paused briefly as they entered, curious glances coming their way, but Sam's easy manner and confident introductions quickly put Olivia at relative ease. Sarah Reeves proved to be a gracious hostess, a handsome woman in her mid-30s with the same storm gray eyes as her brother but lighter hair streaked with premature silver. She welcomed Olivia warmly, making no mention of her scar beyond meeting her eyes directly when they spoke. "I'm so pleased Sam convinced you to come," Sarah said, guiding Olivia to a seat at the long dining table. "We've been curious about Winnemucca's newest resident. Not much escapes notice in a town this size, I'm afraid." The meal was indeed delicious roast beef with potatoes, fresh bread, and early summer vegetables from Sarah's garden. The conversation flowed easily around Olivia, allowing her to observe more than participate as she grew accustomed to being in such a social setting again. Sam, seated across from her, occasionally caught her eye with an encouraging smile but never pressured her to speak more than she was comfortable doing. After the meal, the party moved back to the parlor where a man with a guitar and another with a fiddle struck up lively tunes. Some of the younger folks cleared space for dancing while others gathered in small conversational groups. Olivia found herself seated beside Sarah, watching the musicians with genuine enjoyment. "My brother tells me you're working at Patterson's Laundry," Sarah said during a lull between songs. "That's honest work, but terribly hard on the hands and back." Olivia glanced down at her reddened, chapped hands, which she tried unsuccessfully to soften with a bit of borrowed lotion before the gathering. "It's good work. Mrs. Patterson is fair, and the pay is enough for my needs." Sarah nodded thoughtfully. "I've been thinking of hiring some help around the house, especially now that my oldest boy is working at the mercantile and can't assist as much with chores. Nothing too strenuous, some cooking, light cleaning, mending, that sort of thing." She gave Olivia a sidelong glance. The pay would be better than the laundry, and you'd have Sundays off entirely, not just the afternoons. Startled by what was clearly a job offer, Olivia turned to face Sarah directly. "Mrs. Reeves, while I appreciate the thought, you hardly know me. I'm a stranger in town with no references. Sam is an excellent judge of character," Sarah interrupted gently. "Has been since we were children. If he thinks highly of someone, that's reference enough for me." She patted Olivia's hand. "Think about it. The position is yours if you want it." Before Olivia could respond, the musicians began a new tune, and Sam appeared before them, extending his hand to his sister. "One dance, Sarah. For old time's sake," Sarah laughed, rising to take her brother's hand. "You just want to show off those fancy steps you learned in Reno." She glanced at Olivia. "He'll ask you next, I expect. Fair warning, he's surprisingly good, despite those cowboy boots." As the siblings joined the other dancers, Olivia watched Sam move with unexpected grace for a man of his size and profession. There was a lightness to him when he danced, a joy that transformed his already pleasant features into something genuinely handsome. When the dance ended, he escorted Sarah back to her seat, then turned to Olivia with a questioning look. "I don't dance," she said quickly before he could ask. "I haven't in a long time." Instead of pressing, Sam simply sat down beside her. "Then I'll keep you company if that's all right. I've had my share of stepping on toes for one evening." For the next hour, they really talked about safe, neutral topics that nonetheless revealed aspects of their characters to each other. Sam told her about his ranch, the challenges and rewards of raising cattle in Nevada's unpredictable climate. Olivia shared carefully edited stories of her childhood in Omaha, her love of books, and her hope of someday seeing the Pacific Ocean. "That's only about a day and a half's ride west of here," Sam said. "Well, 2 hard days of riding, I suppose, with the mountains to cross." "I've never been on a horse," Olivia admitted. "My father was a banker. Our travels were limited to trains and the occasional carriage." Sam's eyebrows rose in surprise. A banker's daughter working in a laundry. There must be quite a story there. It was an opening, an invitation to explain her circumstances, but Olivia wasn't ready. Not yet, perhaps not ever. "Life takes unexpected turns," she said simply. Sam studied her face, his expression thoughtful but not pressing. That it does, he agreed. Sometimes for the worse, but sometimes. His eyes held hers for a moment longer than was strictly proper. Sometimes for the better. The moment was broken by the arrival of Sarah's youngest child, a tousle-haired boy of about 6 who tugged insistently at Sam's sleeve. "Uncle Sam, you promised to show Jimmy and me how to throw that lasso before bedtime," Sam laughed, ruffling the boy's hair. "So I did, Thomas. Miss Zimmer, would you excuse me while I fulfill my uncle duties? These young cowboys in training are most insistent on their lessons." As he followed his excited nephew outside where the other children waited, Sam paused at the door, looking back at Olivia with a smile that made her heart skip strangely. In that moment, she realized with startling clarity that she had enjoyed herself tonight, truly enjoyed herself for the first time in over a year, and it terrified her. The next morning, Olivia rose early despite it being Sunday, her day of rest from the laundry. She dressed in her blue dress, intending to attend the small church service held in a converted storefront near the center of town. While not particularly religious, she found the routine of Sunday services comforting, a connection to the normalcy of her former life. As she pinned her hat securely, her thoughts returned to the previous evening, the warmth of Sarah's home, the kindness of her job offer, and most disturbingly, the way Sam Reeves' smile had lingered in her mind long after she'd returned to her boarding house. It was dangerous, this tentative reaching toward connection. Every instinct honed by her traumatic experience warned against it, yet she couldn't deny the small spark of hope that had ignited within her. Could she actually build something here, a life, not just an existence? The church service was simple but heartfelt, the small congregation welcoming if curious about the newcomer in their midst. Olivia sat near the back, her face partially shadowed by her hat, but she noticed several people from Sarah's gathering, nodding in recognition. After the service, she slipped out quickly before anyone could engage her in conversation, needing time alone to think. Her wandering feet carried her to the edge of town, where the buildings gave way to the vast expanse of sagebrush and distant mountains. Nevada's landscape was so different from the rolling farmlands and forests of Nebraska, starker, more dramatic in its contrasts of desert floor and snow-capped peaks. There was a brutal honesty to it that Olivia found strangely appealing. "It grows on you, doesn't it?" Came a familiar voice from behind her. Olivia turned to find Sam approaching, also dressed in his Sunday best, a dark suit that transformed the working rancher into something almost cosmopolitan, save for the unmistakable bow to his legs that came from years in the saddle. "The landscape," he clarified, coming to stand beside her. "Most Easterners find it barren at first, but there's a beauty to it that sneaks up on you. It's honest," Olivia said, giving voice to her earlier thought. "It doesn't pretend to be something it's not." Sam nodded appreciatively. "That's exactly it. What you see is what you get out here." He glanced at her. "I was heading to my sister's for Sunday dinner. She asked me to extend the invitation to you as well if I happened to see you after service." Olivia hesitated. 2 social engagements in as many days seemed excessive, a dangerous pattern of visibility. Sensing her reluctance, Sam added, "It's just family today, Sarah, the children, and myself. Much quieter than last night, I promise." Perhaps it was the genuine warmth in his eyes, or perhaps it was simply the prospect of a home-cooked meal instead of the boarding house's cold Sunday provisions, but Olivia found herself accepting. "That would be lovely, thank you." They walked together toward Sarah's house, maintaining a proper distance, but close enough for conversation. Sam pointed out various landmarks and buildings, sharing bits of Winnemucca's history and his own connection to the area. "My father brought us here when I was 10 and Sarah was 16, he explained. He'd heard about the land opening up for ranching and wanted to try his hand at something new after farming in Missouri proved difficult. Our mother had passed the year before, so it was just the 3 of us making the journey west. That must have been challenging," Olivia observed, thinking of her own parents, now both gone, her mother to consumption 3 years prior, her father to a heart attack just before she'd met Gregory. "It was," Sam acknowledged, "but children adapt quickly, and Sarah became something of a mother figure to me." When she married John Miller at 18, I thought I'd lost her, but they built their home right alongside our ranch. After Father died, I took over the Double R, and things continued that way until John's accident. A shadow crossed his face. That's when I knew I needed to be closer, to help with the children and the house while Sarah found her footing again as a widow. The genuine devotion he showed to his sister touched Olivia deeply. In her experience, men rarely recognized or valued women's struggles, seeing them instead as natural caretakers who should manage hardship without complaint. "Your sister is fortunate to have such support," she said softly. Sam shrugged, a hint of color touching his tanned cheeks. "We're family. It's what you do." They reached Sarah's house to find her children already setting the table while delicious aromas wafted from the kitchen. The meal was simple, but abundant: roast chicken, potatoes, fresh bread, and a sweet apple cobbler for dessert. The conversation flowed naturally, with even the children including Olivia in their tales of school and friends. After the meal, while the older children helped clear the table, Sarah's youngest son Thomas climbed onto Olivia's lap without warning, a well-worn book clutched in his small hands. "Will you read to me, Miss Zimmer?" he asked, his expression earnest. "Uncle Sam says you like books, and I can only read the easy words so far." Startled by both the child's comfortable familiarity and the revelation that Sam had been talking about her, Olivia glanced uncertainly at Sarah, who smiled encouragingly. "Only if Miss Zimmer wants to, Thomas," Sarah reminded her son gently. "I'd be happy to," Olivia said, taking the book, a collection of children's tales, and beginning to read in a soft, clear voice. She became so engrossed in the story, adding different voices for the various characters that made Thomas giggle with delight, that she didn't immediately notice Sam watching her from the doorway, a peculiar expression on his face. When she finally glanced up and caught his eye, the intensity of his gaze made her stumble over a word. "Uncle Sam," Thomas exclaimed. "Miss Zimmer reads even better than you do. She makes the wolf sound really scary," Sam chuckled, moving into the room to ruffle his nephew's hair. "That's because Miss Zimmer is very talented," he said, his eyes still on Olivia's face. "Some people have gifts that aren't immediately visible to everyone." The comment, innocent as it was, made Olivia's breath catch. She knew he wasn't specifically referring to her scar, but the implication that he saw beyond it to the person she truly was struck a chord deep within her. Later, as the afternoon shadows lengthened, Sam offered to walk Olivia back to her boarding house. They strolled in comfortable silence for a while, the warm summer air carrying the sense of dust and sage. "My sister mentioned that she offered you a position," Sam said eventually. "I hope you don't think it was charity. Sarah genuinely needs the help, and you'd be doing us a favor." Olivia considered her response carefully. "It's a generous offer and better circumstances than the laundry, but I have to wonder if it came from you rather than her." Sam's step faltered slightly. "I may have suggested that she could use some assistance, but the offer itself was entirely Sarah's idea. She's a good judge of character in her own right." They paused at a crossroads, the boarding house visible just down the street. Olivia turned to face Sam directly, gathering her courage to ask the question that had been nagging at her since the previous night. "Mr. Reeves, Sam," he corrected gently. "After sharing 2 meals and a folk dance, I think we can dispense with formalities." "Sam," she amended, the name feeling strangely intimate on her lips. "Why have you taken such an interest in me? Is it pity?" The last word came out barely above a whisper. For a moment, he seemed genuinely confused by the question. Then understanding dawned in his eyes, followed by something that might have been frustration or disappointment. "Miss Zimmer, Olivia, if you think my interest in you has anything to do with this," he gestured toward her scarred cheek, "then I've failed to make myself clear." He took a step closer, close enough that she could see the flecks of blue in his gray eyes. "I've known many beautiful women in my 32 years, some conventionally perfect in every feature. None of them have interested me half as much as the woman who stood beneath a cottonwood tree watching the world with such keen intelligence, or who read to my nephew with such gentle enthusiasm, or who faces each day with the kind of quiet courage most men only dream of possessing." Olivia stared at him, unable to formulate a response to such unexpected candor. "Beauty lives within," Sam continued, his voice softer now. "It shines through your eyes, your words, your actions, the mark on your face. It's part of your story, certainly. But it's not your defining feature, not to anyone with the sense to really see you." Tears stung Olivia's eyes, and she blinked rapidly to contain them. "You don't even know my story," she whispered. "I don't need to," he replied simply. "Not unless you choose to share it someday. What I do know is that you're a woman of intelligence and grace who deserves to be seen as such." A silence fell between them, heavy with unspoken thoughts and emotions. Finally, Sam stepped back, restoring a more appropriate distance. "Think about Sarah's offer," he said, his tone returning to casual friendliness. "And know that whatever you decide, you have friends in Winnemucca now." With a tip of his hat, he turned and walked back toward the center of town, leaving Olivia standing at the crossroads in more ways than one. That night, sleep eluded her as she turned Sam's words over in her mind. No one had ever spoken to her that way, with such forthright appreciation of her character rather than her appearance, not even before the scar. Her former suitors in Omaha had complimented her beauty, her graceful dancing, her elegant manners. Gregory had been the most effusive of all, calling her his perfect porcelain doll, a phrase that now made her skin crawl with its implication of ownership and objectification. But Sam Reeves had looked at her scarred face and seen something else entirely: strength, intelligence, worth beyond physical appearance. It was both terrifying and exhilarating. By morning, she had reached a decision. After breakfast, she walked to Mrs. Patterson's laundry, not to work but to resign. "Taking Sarah Reeves' offer, are you?" Mrs. Patterson asked, not seeming surprised in the least. "Good choice. Lighter work, better pay, and respectable as they come. That family's salt of the earth." Olivia nodded, relieved at the older woman's understanding. "Thank you for giving me a chance when I first arrived. I won't forget your kindness." Mrs. Patterson waved away her gratitude. "You worked hard and didn't complain. That's all I ask of anyone." She fixed Olivia with a knowing look. "And if you're worrying about that brother of hers, don't. Sam Reeves isn't like most men. When he looks at a person, he sees what's true about them, not just what shows on the surface." With a flush rising to her cheeks, Olivia thanked the laundress again and made her way to Sarah's house, where she was welcomed with obvious delight. The next 2 weeks passed in a pleasant routine as Olivia settled into her new position. The work was indeed much easier than the laundry, cooking alongside Sarah rather than replacing her, keeping the already well-maintained house tidy, and mending clothes for the active children. She was given a small but comfortable room of her own at the back of the house, a luxury compared to her quarters at the boarding house. Sam visited frequently, usually for evening meals or Sunday dinners. His interactions with Olivia remained friendly but respectful, never pushing for more intimacy than she seemed comfortable with. They developed an easy rapport, discovering shared interests in books and music. Sometimes in the evenings, when the children were in bed, the three adults would sit on the porch, Sarah sewing, Sam smoking his pipe, and Olivia simply enjoying the peaceful companionship. It was during one such evening, nearly a month after Olivia had come to work for Sarah, that the conversation turned to the upcoming Founders' Day celebration in Winnemucca. "The whole town turns out," Sarah explained, her needle flashing in the lamplight. "There's a parade in the morning, games and contests in the afternoon, and dancing in the evening. The children look forward to it all year. I've been practicing my shooting for the marksmanship competition," Sam added with a grin. "Won it 3 years running before Jenkins from the feed store bested me last summer, hoping to reclaim my title this year." "You men and your contests," Sarah said, rolling her eyes affectionately at her brother. "Olivia, you'll need a new dress for the dance. We could ride into town tomorrow and look at fabrics at the mercantile." Olivia stiffened, the pleasant mood suddenly shattered by the prospect of being on display at such a public event. "I don't think I'll attend the dance," she said carefully. "Perhaps I could stay with the younger children while you enjoy the evening." Sarah and Sam exchanged a glance. "Nonsense," Sarah said firmly. "Everyone attends the Founders' Day dance. It's practically mandatory for residents of Winnemucca." I'm not much for dancing anymore, Olivia insisted, her hand unconsciously rising to touch her scar. Sam leaned forward in his chair, his expression serious. Olivia, I can't pretend to understand fully what you've experienced, but I do know that hiding away isn't the answer. This town has accepted you, perhaps it's time to accept that acceptance. His words struck a nerve, piercing through the protective shell she'd built around herself. Was she using her scar as an excuse to avoid living fully? The thought was uncomfortable but impossible to dismiss. I'll think about it, she conceded, not meeting either sibling's gaze. Later that night, after Sarah had gone to bed, Olivia remained on the porch, staring up at the vast canopy of stars that seemed to hang impossibly close in the clear Nevada sky. The sound of a match being struck announced Sam's presence, as he returned from checking on his horse in the small stable behind the house. "Penny for your thoughts," he said, settling into the chair beside her and relighting his pipe. Olivia continued gazing upward. "I was just thinking how different the sky looks here compared to Omaha, so many more stars visible. Less city light to compete with them," Sam agreed. "One of the things I love about Nevada, the sky feels endless." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the only sounds the distant howl of a coyote and the gentle puffing of Sam's pipe. "I was engaged once," Olivia said suddenly, the words emerging before she could reconsider. "In Omaha, to a man named Gregory Wilcox." Sam remained silent, his only acknowledgement a slight inclination of his head, encouraging her to continue if she wished. "He was charming, educated, from a good family. My father approved of the match before he passed away." Olivia's fingers traced the familiar pattern of her scar through her shawl. "But after we were engaged, Gregory changed, or perhaps he simply revealed his true nature." The memories came flooding back, Gregory's initial small criticisms that grew into controlling demands, his jealousy when she spoke to other men, his insistence on knowing her whereabouts at all times. She had attributed it to love at first, to his fear of losing her after she'd become an orphan with her father's death. How wrong she had been. "He became possessive," she continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "Everything I did was wrong somehow. My clothes were too revealing or too plain, my manner too friendly or too cold. I could never please him." Sam remained motionless beside her, but she could feel the tension radiating from him, a controlled anger on her behalf that was somehow comforting rather than frightening. "I finally found the courage to break the engagement after he struck me for speaking to a male cousin at a social gathering. When I returned his ring, he seemed to accept it calmly. I should have known better." Olivia closed her eyes briefly, steeling herself to continue. "He came to my home that night. I was alone. The housekeeper had already left for the evening. He'd been drinking. He said if he couldn't have me, no one would want me." Her hand rose to her face, fingers lightly tracing the raised line of tissue. "He used his hunting knife. Said he was marking what was his. I don't remember much after that. A neighbor heard my screams and intervened. Gregory fled before the authorities arrived." Sam's knuckles were white where he gripped the arm of his chair, but his voice when he finally spoke was controlled, gentle. "Did they catch him?" Olivia shook her head. "He disappeared, but he sent me a letter while I was still recovering. He said he would find me eventually, that what belonged to him always returned in the end." She finally turned to look at Sam directly. "That's why I came west, why I changed my name slightly, why I've tried to remain invisible," understanding dawned in Sam's eyes, "and why a public event like the Founders' Day dance frightens you." "Yes." She twisted her hands in her lap. "It's not vanity that makes me hesitant, Sam. It's fear that somehow, if I step too fully into public life here, he'll discover where I am." Sam set his pipe aside and leaned forward, his expression grave. "Olivia, I can't promise that your past won't find you someday, but I can promise that if it does, you won't face it alone. Not anymore." The simple declaration, spoken with such quiet certainty, broke something within Olivia, a dam that had held back not only her tears but her capacity to trust, to hope, to believe in human goodness again. She covered her face with her hands as silent sobs shook her shoulders. Without a word, Sam moved to kneel before her chair, gently drawing her into his arms. He held her while she wept, one hand stroking her hair, the other steady against her back. He made no attempt to hush her or minimize her pain with platitudes. He simply provided the sanctuary of his presence until the storm of emotion passed. When Olivia finally pulled away, embarrassed by her breakdown, Sam handed her his handkerchief with a small smile. "Feel better?" he asked, returning to his chair to give her space. "Yes," she admitted, dabbing at her eyes, "though I'm mortified to have cried all over your shirt. It's seen worse. Ranch work isn't exactly clean." His expression grew serious again. "Thank you for trusting me with your story. It explains much about you that I'd wondered." Olivia folded the damp handkerchief carefully. "I haven't told anyone since I arrived here. Not even the doctor who treated me in Omaha knew the full truth. I told him it was a robbery gone wrong. Why tell me now?" It was a fair question, one she'd asked herself even as the words were spilling out. "Because," she said slowly, "I'm tired of letting fear dictate my life. Because this place, these people, you have shown me that perhaps there's another way to live, even with this." She gestured to her face. "And because I think you deserve to know what you might be involving yourself with by befriending me." Sam's eyes held her steadily. "Nothing you've told me changes my opinion of you, Olivia. If anything, knowing what you've overcome only increases my admiration." The sincerity in his voice was unmistakable, warming something long cold within Olivia's heart. "Then perhaps," she said with a small smile, "I will need that new dress for the Founders' Day dance after all." The weeks leading up to Founders' Day were busy ones in Winnemucca. The entire town seemed engaged in preparations. Storefronts were painted, streets swept, decorations crafted. At Sarah's house, the children talked of little else, especially the contests they planned to enter and the treats they anticipated. True to her word, Sarah took Olivia to the mercantile where they selected a pattern and fabric for a new dress, a becoming shade of deep blue that Sarah insisted complemented Olivia's complexion and eyes. In the evenings, the women worked on the garment together, Sarah's skilled fingers guiding Olivia through the more complex aspects of the design. Sam continued his regular visits, often bringing small gifts from his ranch or town, fresh flowers, a particularly sweet apple, once even a book of poetry he'd noticed at the mercantile and thought she might enjoy. Their conversations deepened, ranging from childhood memories to dreams for the future, though Olivia still maintained a certain caution, a protective distance born of hard experience. The day before the celebration, as Olivia was hanging laundry in the yard, she noticed a stranger riding slowly past the house. Something about the way he studied the property made her pause, a chill running up her spine despite the warm summer day. He was well dressed for a traveler, his horse fine-looking and well-groomed. When he saw Olivia watching, he tipped his hat with exaggerated courtesy before continuing on toward town. She tried to dismiss her unease as simple paranoia, but the encounter left her distracted and jumpy for the remainder of the day. That evening, when Sam arrived for supper, he immediately noticed her subdued mood. "Everything all right?" He asked quietly while Sarah was occupied with setting the table. Olivia hesitated, not wanting to alarm him over what was likely nothing. "Just tired from all the preparations, I think." Sam didn't look entirely convinced, but didn't press the issue as the children burst into the kitchen, eager to show him a project they'd made for the celebration. The morning of Founders' Day dawned clear and warm, promising perfect weather for the festivities. Olivia helped the children dress in their finest clothes, then donned her new blue dress, which fit perfectly and was far more flattering than anything she'd worn since leaving Omaha. Sarah arranged Olivia's dark hair in an elegant style that framed her face becomingly without attempting to hide her scar. "There," Sarah said, stepping back to admire her work. "You look lovely." Olivia studied her reflection with mixed emotions. The woman in the mirror looked almost like her former self, the self that had attended parties and musicales in Omaha, that had once taken such things for granted. Yet the scar remained, a permanent reminder of how drastically her life had changed. "Stop worrying," Sarah said gently, reading her expression. "Winnemucca isn't Omaha, and you're not the same woman who left there. You're stronger now, whether you realize it or not." The main street of Winnemucca had been transformed with bunting and banners proclaiming Founders' Day, 1876, and 20 years of progress. A bandstand had been erected at one end of the street, and various booths and tables lined the boardwalks, offering everything from homemade pies to handcrafted items for sale. The parade began at 10 o'clock, with the town's oldest resident, 90-year-old Ezra Johnson, leading the procession in a decorated wagon. Various community groups followed: the Volunteer Fire Brigade, the school children, the Ladies' Aid Society, and local businesses with festive displays. Sarah's oldest son marched with his fellow mercantile employees, while the younger children watched excitedly from the sidewalk. Throughout the morning, Olivia was aware of curious glances and whispered conversations as townsfolk, who hadn't yet met her in person, took note of her presence at Sarah Reeves' side. But to her surprise, when introductions were made, most people were welcoming and seemed more interested in getting to know her than in staring at her scar. "Told you," Sarah murmured after a particularly friendly exchange with the mayor's wife. "Decent folks here." After the parade came the picnic lunch on the town green, where long tables groaned with potluck contributions from every household. Olivia found herself seated between Sarah and the schoolteacher, Miss Abernathy, who engaged her in a lively discussion about books that left little room for self-consciousness. As the meal concluded, Sam appeared, looking handsome in his best shirt and vest, his usually unruly hair tamed for the occasion. "Ladies," he greeted them with a tip of his hat. "Enjoying the festivities?" "Very much," Sarah replied. "Though Thomas is practically vibrating with anticipation for the children's races this afternoon. And I need to prepare for the marksmanship contest," Sam added with a grin. "Jenkins has been practicing all year, I hear." He turned to Olivia. "Would you care to watch the shooting competition? I could use a good luck charm." The warmth in his eyes made it impossible to refuse, and Olivia soon found herself standing among the spectators at the makeshift shooting range that had been set up at the edge of town. Sam and 5 other men, including the feed store owner Jenkins, were preparing their rifles for the contest. "The rules are simple," explained the elderly judge to the gathered crowd. 6 shots at targets ranging from 50 to 200 yards. Highest score wins the blue ribbon and bragging rights for the year. The competition was surprisingly tense, with the lead changing hands several times. Sam shot with a quiet concentration that was fascinating to watch. No bravado, no unnecessary flourishes, just calm precision as he sighted down the barrel of his Winchester. When the final scores were tallied, he had beaten Jenkins by just 2 points. As the crowd applauded, Sam accepted the ribbon with a modest nod, then made his way through the well-wishers to where Olivia stood. "Congratulations," she said, genuinely impressed by his skill. "You make it look effortless." "Years of practice," he replied, tucking the ribbon into his vest pocket. "My father insisted I learn to shoot properly before I was allowed to hunt alone, said a good marksman respects his weapon enough to master it completely." They walked back toward the town center together, where the children's races were about to begin. Thomas spotted them and ran over excitedly. "Did you win, Uncle Sam? Did you beat Mr. Jenkins?" Sam swung the boy up onto his shoulders. "I did indeed, thanks to Miss Zimmer bringing me luck." Thomas beamed down at Olivia. "Will you watch my race too? I'm going to win the sack race. I've been practicing." "I wouldn't miss it," Olivia promised, charmed by the child's enthusiasm. As they reached the area set aside for the children's contests, Olivia happened to glance across the street and froze. There, leaning against the hitching post in front of the hotel, was the same well-dressed stranger she'd seen riding past the house the previous day. He was watching her intently, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Olivia," Sam's voice seemed to come from far away. "What's wrong?" She tore her gaze away from the stranger to find Sam looking at her with concern, having set Thomas down to join the other children preparing for their race. "That man," she said quietly, nodding toward the hotel. "He rode past Sarah's house yesterday, watching it. Something about him." She trailed off, not wanting to voice her fear without certainty. Sam's expression hardened as he followed her gaze. "Stay here," he said firmly. "I'll find out who he is." But before Sam could cross the street, the man straightened, tipped his hat in their direction with deliberate slowness, and disappeared into the hotel. "Do you think?" Sam hesitated, clearly not wanting to alarm her unnecessarily. "Could it be the man from your past?" Olivia shook her head, confusion warring with fear. "I don't know. I couldn't see clearly enough. Gregory was more slightly built, and this man seems older somehow, but the way he looked at me." She shivered despite the warm afternoon. Sam's hand came to rest protectively at the small of her back. "I'll ask around, see if anyone knows him. Most strangers passing through Winnemucca don't dress that fine or stay at the hotel. Someone will have noticed him." The incident cast a shadow over Olivia's enjoyment of the afternoon's activities, though she tried not to let it show as she cheered for Thomas in his race, which he won, and helped Sarah serve lemonade at the refreshment booth. Sam disappeared for a time, presumably making inquiries about the stranger, but returned in time for the community supper that preceded the evening dance. "His name is Edwin Blackburn," Sam murmured to Olivia as they stood in line for food. "Registered at the hotel 3 days ago, said he's a cattle buyer from St. Louis looking at stock in the area." His expression was troubled. "But Jenkins at the feed store says he hasn't approached any of the local ranchers about cattle, just been asking questions around town." "What kind of questions?" Olivia asked, her stomach tightening with apprehension. "General ones about the community, who's who," Sam hesitated. "And more specific ones about Sarah's household, who lives there, how long they've been in Winnemucca." A cold fear gripped Olivia's heart. It couldn't be coincidence. Someone was looking for her, maybe not Gregory himself, but someone connected to him. Her first instinct was to flee, to pack her meager belongings and disappear again before danger could find her. As if reading her thoughts, Sam's hand found hers, squeezing gently. "Don't panic," he said softly. "We don't know for certain who he is or what he wants, and you're not alone this time, Olivia. Remember that." The reassurance steadied her somewhat, though anxiety continued to simmer beneath her outward composure throughout the meal. As dusk fell and lanterns were lit around the town square where the dancing would take place, Olivia seriously considered returning to Sarah's house, using fatigue as an excuse. But as the band began tuning their instruments, Sam appeared at her side, his expression determined. "One dance," he said, extending his hand. "Just one, and if you still want to leave afterward, I'll escort you home personally." Olivia hesitated, glancing around nervously for any sign of the stranger called Blackburn. "Don't let fear win tonight," Sam urged quietly. "Not when you've come so far." The simple challenge, spoken without judgment, but with complete understanding, made Olivia's decision for her. She placed her hand in Sam's and allowed him to lead her to the growing circle of dancers as the band struck up a lively Virginia reel. Dancing with Sam proved to be unexpectedly joyful. He was indeed graceful despite his cowboy boots, guiding her through the steps with a light hand and an encouraging smile whenever she hesitated. By the end of the reel, Olivia found herself laughing for the first time in what felt like years, breathless, and flushed with exertion and pleasure. "Another?" Sam asked as the band paused briefly between tunes. Before she could answer, a voice spoke from behind her, a voice that stopped her heart and froze the blood in her veins. "Might I have the honor of the next dance, Miss Zimmer?" Slowly, as if in a nightmare, Olivia turned to find Gregory Wilcox standing there, immaculately dressed and smiling as though they were meeting at an Omaha social gathering rather than in a dusty Nevada town square after a year of separation. He looked different, older, with a beard that hadn't been there before and streaks of premature gray at his temples, but his eyes were the same, cold and possessive beneath his polite facade. Or should I say, Miss Zimmer now? How creative, merely altering your surname by one letter. His smile didn't reach his eyes as they traveled deliberately to the scar on her face. "I see you've kept my little reminder close all this time." Sam stepped forward, placing himself slightly in front of Olivia in a protective stance. "I believe the lady is already engaged for this dance," he said, his voice level but with an undercurrent of steel. Gregory's gaze shifted to Sam, assessing him with casual disdain. "Ah, I see. You must be the rancher I've heard so much about from the gossiping locals." How quaint that Olivia has found herself a rustic protector. He looked back at Olivia, his expression hardening slightly. Though I'm afraid you've been misled, sir. This woman is my fiancée, and I've come a very long way to bring her home. That's a lie, Olivia said, finding her voice at last. Our engagement ended over a year ago, as you well know, Gregory. A temporary misunderstanding, Gregory replied smoothly. One that I've traveled nearly 2,000 miles to rectify. Surely you didn't think I would simply let you disappear from my life. His voice dropped to a menacing purr. Especially after I went to such trouble to ensure you'd never forget me. Sam's posture stiffened, and Olivia could see the muscles in his jaw working as he controlled his anger. Mr. Wilcox, I suggest you leave this lady alone and return to wherever you came from. She's made her wishes clear. Gregory laughed, the sound devoid of any genuine amusement. Her wishes? What about my wishes? What about the embarrassment I suffered when she jilted me, the humiliation of having to explain to all of Omaha society that my fiancé had run off? His facade of civility slipped momentarily, revealing the rage beneath. She belongs to me, Cowboy. I marked her so that everyone would know it, and I've come to collect what's mine. By now, their confrontation had drawn attention. The dancers nearby had stopped, watching with concern, and Sarah was making her way through the crowd toward them, alarm evident on her face. Olivia straightened her spine, drawing on a well of courage she hadn't known she possessed. I don't belong to you or anyone else, Gregory. What you did to me wasn't love, it was possession, control, cruelty. I've made a new life here among people who see me as a person, not a possession. Gregory's expression darkened. Don't be ridiculous, Olivia. You're damaged goods now. Who else would want you with that face, this cowboy? Is that what you think? He sneered at Sam. Trust me, sir, once the novelty wears off, you'll see her for what she truly is, a plain, ordinary woman with delusions above her station. I'm willing to overlook her. Imperfections now, others won't be so charitable. Sam took a step forward, his control visibly slipping. That's enough, he growled. You will apologize to Miss Zimmer and then you will leave this town. Tonight. Gregory's hand moved to his jacket, and Olivia realized with horror that he was reaching for a weapon. I don't take orders from ranch hands, he spat. Olivia is coming with me, one way or another. What happened next unfolded so quickly that Olivia could barely process it. As Gregory began to draw a small pistol from inside his jacket, Sam moved with the lightning reflexes of a man accustomed to split-second decisions in dangerous situations. His fist connected with Gregory's jaw before the pistol could clear the fabric, sending the smaller man staggering backward. The weapon fell to the ground, where the town sheriff, attracted by the commotion, quickly retrieved it. What's going on here? Demanded Sheriff Taylor, a burly man with a walrus mustache and no-nonsense demeanor. This man was threatening Miss Zimmer with that pistol, Sam explained, standing protectively beside Olivia, who was trembling with the sudden release of tension. He claims she belongs to him and has refused to leave her alone despite her clear wishes. Gregory straightened, touching his jaw gingerly where a bruise was already forming. This is absurd, he protested. I was merely trying to reclaim my fiancé who left Omaha under confused circumstances. If anyone should be arrested, it's this cowboy who assaulted me without provocation. Sheriff Taylor looked between the two men, then at Olivia. Miss, what's your version of events? Olivia took a deep breath, aware that the entire town seemed to be holding its collective breath, waiting for her response. This was the moment she had dreaded, having her past exposed, becoming the center of scandal and gossip. But as she looked at Gregory's confident smirk, certain that she would be too ashamed to speak the truth publicly, something hardened within her. Sheriff, she said clearly, loud enough for those nearby to hear, this man was once my fiancé in Omaha. I broke our engagement when I discovered his true violent nature. In retaliation, he attacked me with a hunting knife, giving me this scar. She touched her cheek briefly. He threatened to find me if I ever tried to leave him, which is why I came west under a slightly altered name. He has been asking questions about me in town for days, and just now threatened me again, reaching for that weapon when Mr. Reeves intervened. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Gregory's face contorted with rage as he realized his carefully constructed image was crumbling before these strangers. "She's lying," he hissed. "I never touched her." "That scar was from an accident," Sam interrupted, his voice dangerously quiet. "The kind of accident that forms a perfect line from temple to jaw. The kind that happens to match the blade of a hunting knife. Don't insult our intelligence, Wilcox." Sheriff Taylor had heard enough. "Mr. Wilcox, I'm placing you under arrest for threatening a citizen of this town with a deadly weapon. We'll sort out these other allegations at a proper hearing." He gestured to his deputy. "Take him to the jail." As the deputy moved to handcuff Gregory, he lunged suddenly toward Olivia, his face twisted with malice. "You'll regret this," he snarled. "You think you've escaped me. You think this scar is the worst I can do." "I'll show you." His threats were cut short as both Sam and the deputy restrained him, dragging him away from Olivia as he continued to shout obscenities and threats. The crowd parted to let them pass, shocked murmurs following in their wake. In the sudden silence that fell after Gregory's removal, Olivia became acutely aware of every eye upon her. The weight of their stares curious, pitying, judging pressed down until she could barely breathe. Without a word, she turned and fled the town square, needing to escape the suffocating attention. She didn't stop running until she reached the small bridge at the edge of town, where a creek gurgled peacefully beneath, untouched by human drama. Gripping the wooden railing, Olivia gulped in the cool night air, her whole body trembling with the aftermath of fear and adrenaline. Olivia. She didn't need to turn to know that Sam had followed her. Of course he had. "I can't go back there," she said, her voice barely audible over the sound of the water. "Not with everyone knowing, everyone staring." Sam moved to stand beside her, not touching her but close enough that she could feel the reassuring warmth of his presence. "They're not staring at your scar, Olivia. They're in awe of your courage." A bitter laugh escaped her. "Courage? I ran away from him from Omaha and now from the dance. That's not courage." "Surviving is courage," Sam said firmly. "Rebuilding your life is courage. And standing up to that monster tonight, telling the truth despite your fear, that was the kind of courage most people never have to find within themselves." Olivia finally turned to look at him, searching his face for any sign of pity or disgust. She found neither, only the same steady warmth and admiration he'd always shown her. "What happens now?" she asked, suddenly exhausted. "He'll tell everyone in town the worst version of everything, twist the truth until I'm the villain." "Let him try," Sam replied with unexpected fierceness. "Winnemucca knows you now, Olivia. They've seen your character, your kindness, your worth. Gregory Wilcox's words won't change that. And when he's released, you heard him, he won't stop. He'll never stop." Sam's expression hardened. "Sheriff Taylor takes threats against women very seriously. His own sister was killed by an abusive husband years ago. Once he hears the full story, he'll make sure Wilcox faces proper charges, possibly even extradition back to Nebraska if there's an outstanding warrant for the attack on you." The practical considerations steadied Olivia somewhat. "I never filed charges," she admitted. "I was too ashamed, too afraid." "Then we'll send telegrams to Omaha tomorrow. Speak to the authorities there. The doctor who treated you must have records. There must be witnesses who saw him flee." Sam took her hands in his touch gentle but firm. "We'll fight this properly, through the law. You won't have to run anymore, Olivia." The promise in his words, the absolute certainty with which he included himself in her future, brought fresh tears to her eyes, not tears of fear or pain, but of a strange, new hope. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would you do all this for me?" Sam's eyes held hers, stormy gray in the moonlight. "Because from the moment I saw you, I recognized something in you that called to something in me. Because every day since then, I've grown more certain that you are the bravest, strongest, most beautiful woman I've ever known inside and out." "Sam, let me finish," he said gently. "I know it's too soon. I know you're still healing from wounds both visible and hidden. I'm not asking for promises or commitments. I'm simply telling you that whatever comes next, you won't face it alone, not unless you want to." The sincerity in his voice was unmistakable, touching something deep within Olivia that she'd thought permanently broken. Without conscious decision, she moved closer, raising one hand to touch his face, a mirror of her own vulnerability, offering rather than hiding her scarred side in the moonlight. "I don't want to be alone anymore," she said softly. "I've been alone and afraid for so long, Sam, too long." His arms encircled her then, drawing her into an embrace that felt like shelter after an endless storm. Olivia closed her eyes, allowing herself to absorb the simple comfort of human connection without fear for the first time in over a year. They might have remained that way for minutes or hours. Time seemed suspended in the quiet sanctuary they'd created together. Eventually, soft footsteps on the bridge announced Sarah's approach. "I thought I might find you two here," she said, her voice gentle with understanding. "The sheriff would like to speak with you, Olivia, when you're ready. Nothing urgent. Wilcox is securely locked up, but he needs your statement for the official record." Olivia stepped back from Sam's embrace, though his hand remained supportively at the small of her back. "Of course," she replied, her voice steadier than she'd expected. "I'm ready now." The walk back to town was not the ordeal Olivia had anticipated. Though many people glanced their way, the expressions she encountered were largely supportive rather than judgmental. Several women nodded in solidarity, and a few of the men touched their hats respectfully as she passed. Word had clearly spread quickly about the confrontation and its context. The sheriff's office was a small building next to the jail, simply furnished with a desk, a few chairs, and wanted posters lining the walls. Sheriff Taylor rose as they entered, his gruff manner softened by obvious concern. "Miss Zimmer, I appreciate you coming. Please have a seat." He gestured to a chair across from his desk, then glanced at Sam and Sarah. "Would you prefer to speak privately?" Olivia shook her head. "No, I'd like them to stay if that's all right." For the next hour, Olivia recounted her history with Gregory in detail: their courtship, engagement, his increasingly controlling behavior, the attack, and her flight west. The sheriff took careful notes, occasionally asking clarifying questions but never doubting her account or suggesting she might have provoked Gregory's violence. "This is a serious matter," he said when she had finished. "Assault with a deadly weapon, stalking across state lines, attempted kidnapping based on what happened tonight. These are federal offenses, Miss Zimmer. I've already sent telegrams to the authorities in Omaha inquiring about any outstanding warrants for Wilcox. Until I hear back, he'll remain in our jail." "And afterward?" Olivia asked, dreading the answer. "If there are no warrants," Sheriff Taylor's expression was grim but determined. "Even without prior charges, what happened tonight is enough to hold him. I witnessed him reaching for that weapon myself, heard his threats. No judge in Nevada would let that pass, especially given the circumstances." He leaned forward, his weathered face serious. "Miss Zimmer, I promise you this. Gregory Wilcox will not leave custody until this matter is properly resolved through the courts. You have my word on that." The sincerity of his pledge eased some of Olivia's lingering fear. As they left the sheriff's office, the town square came into view. To her surprise, the dancing had resumed, though more subdued than before. Life continued, even after moments of high drama. There was something reassuring about that simple fact. "Would you like to go home?" Sam asked, sensitive to her exhaustion. Olivia considered for a moment, then shook her head. "Actually, I think I'd like one more dance," she said, surprising herself as much as him, "if the offer still stands." Sam's smile was like sunrise breaking across his face. "It does," he said, offering his arm. "It always will." As they rejoined the dancers for a gentle waltz, Olivia was aware of curious glances, but found she no longer cared. Let them look. Let them see a woman who had survived the worst a man could do and still found the courage to dance under the stars. Let them see her scar and know that it marked not her shame but her strength. Sam's hand was warm and steady at her waist as he guided her through the steps, his eyes never leaving hers. In them, she saw not pity for what she had endured but admiration for who she had become because of it, or perhaps despite it. "Beauty lives within," he murmured, echoing his words from weeks before. "But it shines from you so brightly tonight that I'm surprised the stars don't pale in comparison." Olivia felt her cheeks warm at the unabashed compliment. "Careful, Mr. Reeves. People will talk if you flatter a lady so openly." "Let them talk," he replied with a grin. "I've got nothing to hide when it comes to my admiration for you, Olivia Zimmer." As they danced beneath the vast Nevada sky, surrounded by the community that had become her sanctuary, Olivia allowed herself to believe that perhaps her scars, both the visible one on her face and the invisible ones on her heart, were not endings but beginnings. Not marks of ownership but badges of survival. And in Sam's steadfast presence, in his unwavering respect and growing affection, she glimpsed the possibility of a future where love didn't demand perfection or obedience, but offered acceptance and partnership instead. It was, she realized with quiet wonder, the first time she had thought of love without fear in over a year. The legal proceedings against Gregory Wilcox moved with surprising swiftness. Telegrams from Omaha confirmed that while no formal charges had been filed at the time of the attack, several witnesses had given statements about Gregory's violent behavior and Olivia's injuries. The doctor who had treated her wound provided detailed records that corroborated her account. With this evidence, along with the events in Winnemucca, the territorial judge had no hesitation in ordering Gregory held for trial. Throughout the preliminary hearings, Olivia maintained her composure, testifying clearly despite Gregory's attempts to intimidate her with his glares from the defendant's table. Sam attended every session, a steady presence at her side that gave her strength when her courage wavered. Sarah took care of practical matters, ensuring Olivia had proper clothes for court, and that rumors in town were met with factual corrections rather than allowed to flourish. 3 months after Founders' Day, Gregory Wilcox was convicted of assault with a deadly weapon, crossing state lines with intent to commit violence, and attempted kidnapping. The judge, a stern man with no patience for men who abused women, sentenced him to 10 years in the territorial prison. As Gregory was led away, his face contorted with impotent rage, he looked at Olivia one last time. "This isn't over," he spat. "I'll still be young when I get out. Remember that." Instead of cowering as he clearly expected, Olivia met his gaze steadily. "And I'll still be free," she replied, her voice carrying clearly through the courtroom. Remember that. It was the last time she would see him for a decade, though the memory of his threats occasionally disturbed her sleep in the months that followed. On those nights, she would stand by her window at Sarah's house, watching the stars and reminding herself that she was safe, that she had found not just shelter but home in this dusty corner of Nevada. Life settled into a new pattern after the trial. Olivia continued working for Sarah, though her role expanded beyond simple household help to something more akin to a business partner, as Sarah decided to open a small dress shop in town. Olivia's skills with a needle, combined with her Eastern understanding of fashion, proved invaluable in attracting customers who wanted styles a bit more current than the usual frontier offerings. Sam remained a constant in their lives, spending more time in town than at his ranch, much to the amusement of his cowhands who teased him good-naturedly about his frequent visits to his sister's house. His courtship of Olivia progressed with respectful patience, never pushing for more than she was ready to give, but making his feelings increasingly clear through both words and actions. They had their first real argument 6 months after the trial, when Sam suggested that Olivia might consider traveling to San Francisco to consult a surgeon who specialized in facial reconstruction. He had read about the doctor's work in a newspaper and thought it might help reduce the prominence of her scar. "I thought you of all people saw beyond this," Olivia had said, hurt and angry, gesturing to her face. "I do," Sam insisted. "Always have, always will. But I also see how you still flinch sometimes when you catch your reflection unexpectedly, how you automatically turn that side away from strangers. I thought." He ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "I thought it might help you feel more comfortable, more confident." "Not for my sake, Olivia, for yours." His genuine concern had diffused her anger, though she still declined the suggestion. "This face is mine now," she explained more gently. "The scar is part of my story, part of what made me who I am today. I'm learning to accept it, even if I don't love it. And the people who matter to me, you, Sarah, the children, our friends here, you see me, not just the mark he left." Sam had nodded, understanding dawning in his eyes. You're right, I'm sorry. It was presumptuous of me to suggest it without considering what it means to you. But thank you, Olivia had added, touched by his intention if not his suggestion, for always thinking of my happiness, even when you're misguided about what might contribute to it. That evening, as they sat on Sarah's porch watching the sunset paint the distant mountains in shades of gold and purple, Sam had taken Olivia's hand in his expression unusually serious. I've been thinking, he began, about what you said earlier. About the scar being part of your story, part of what shaped you. He hesitated, choosing his words carefully. I want you to know that I love every chapter of your story, Olivia. The ones before we met, the difficult ones that brought you here, and especially the ones we're writing together now. The simple declaration the first time he had spoken of love directly had rendered Olivia momentarily speechless. When she finally found her voice, it emerged as little more than a whisper. Even the unwritten chapters, the ones still to come, Sam's smile had been both tender and certain. Especially those, if you'll allow me to be part of them. Their first kiss had followed, gentle and questioning at first, then deepening as Olivia responded with an enthusiasm that surprised them both. When they finally parted, breathless and smiling, Sam had rested his forehead against hers, his hand cradling the scarred side of her face with a reverence that made her heart swell. I love you, Olivia Zimmer, he had said simply. All of you exactly as you are. I love you too, she had replied, the words no longer frightening but liberating. More than I ever thought possible again. Their courtship continued through the changing seasons, picnics by the creek in summer, harvest celebrations in autumn, sleigh rides through the snow-covered landscape in winter. Sam taught Olivia to ride, starting with his gentlest mare and progressing to more spirited mounts as her confidence grew. She taught him to appreciate poetry and introduced him to authors he'd never encountered before. Together, they discovered new aspects of themselves and each other, building a foundation of friendship and respect that deepened their growing love. A year after Gregory's conviction, on a perfect spring day with wildflowers carpeting the Nevada hillsides, Sam proposed properly down on one knee in a meadow near his ranch, a simple but elegant diamond ring in his hand. I know you might have reservations about marriage after what you experienced, he said, his usually confident voice tinged with uncharacteristic nervousness. And I want you to know that I will respect whatever decision you make. But I also want you to know that my love for you, my desire to build a life with you, is the surest thing I've ever felt. Olivia looked down at this man who had shown her that love could be gentle, that partnership didn't mean possession, that beauty truly did live within and could be recognized by those who took the time to see clearly. Yes, she said, her heart so full she thought it might burst. Yes, I will marry you, Samuel Reeves. Their wedding 3 months later was a community celebration, with what seemed like all of Winnemucca turning out to witness their union. Olivia wore a dress of ivory silk that she and Sarah had designed together, her dark hair adorned with white roses. As she walked down the aisle of the small church on the arm of Sheriff Taylor, who had offered to give her away, she caught glimpses of the faces watching her not with pity for her scar, but with genuine happiness for the love she had found. Sam waited at the altar, tall and handsome in his new suit, his eyes never leaving her face as she approached. When the minister asked who gave this woman in marriage, Sheriff Taylor's gruff voice carried clearly through the church. She gives herself freely, as is her right. I'm just honored to escort her. The statement, so different from the traditional response, brought tears to Olivia's eyes and a murmur of approval from the congregation. It was perfect an acknowledgement of her independence, her ownership of herself, even as she chose to join her life with Sam's. The vows they exchanged were both traditional and personal, with additions they had written themselves. Sam promised not only to love and cherish her, but to honor your strength, respect your independence, and walk beside you rather than ahead or behind. Olivia promised to trust in the shelter of your love without surrendering my selfhood, to be your partner in all things as we build our lives together. The reception at Sarah's house afterward lasted well into the evening, with dancing under the stars and enough food to feed half the territory. As the celebration continued around them, Sam led Olivia away from the festivities to the quiet of the garden, where they could speak privately for a moment. "Mrs. Reeves," he said, testing the name with obvious pleasure. "How does it feel?" Olivia smiled up at him, her heart so full of joy it seemed impossible to contain it all. "Wonderful, right, as though I've finally found where I truly belong." Sam brushed a strand of hair from her face, his fingers gently tracing the line of her scar in the familiar gesture that had become a symbol of his complete acceptance. "You know, when I first saw you in town, trying so hard to hide this, all I could think was that you were the most beautiful woman I'd ever seen, not despite this mark, but somehow because of it." It spoke of survival, of strength. "Beauty lives within," Olivia quoted softly, remembering his words from long ago. "You taught me to believe that again, Sam, to see myself through your eyes instead of his." "And now," he asked, his arms encircling her waist, "what do you see when you look at your reflection?" Olivia considered the question seriously. "I see a woman who survived something terrible but refused to be defined by it. I see strength and, yes, even beauty, the kind that matters." She smiled up at him, no longer turning her scarred side away. "I see the woman you love, who loves you completely in return." Sam's kiss was both tender and passionate, a promise of the life they would build together. When they finally rejoined the celebration, it was with the serene confidence of two people who had found in each other not just love but true partnership, a meeting of equals, each valuing the other for exactly who they were. 5 years passed, bringing changes and growth to their lives together. Sam and Olivia built a new house halfway between his ranch and town, allowing him to manage his expanding cattle operation while giving Olivia easy access to the dress shop she now co-owned with Sarah. Their home became known for its hospitality, with frequent gatherings of friends and neighbors for meals or music or simply conversation. 3 years into their marriage, their first child was born, a son they named William, after Sam's father. The boy had his father's gray eyes and his mother's dark hair, along with a curious, adventurous spirit that kept them both constantly on their toes. 2 years later, they welcomed twin daughters, Elizabeth and Rebecca, whose identical features and mischievous temperaments brought both joy and chaos to the Reeves household. Parenthood suited them both, though it came with challenges they hadn't anticipated. Sam discovered reserves of patience he hadn't known he possessed, while Olivia found that her past experiences made her particularly attuned to her children's emotional needs. They parented as they did everything else as partners, supporting each other's strengths and compensating for each other's weaknesses. On the 10th anniversary of Olivia's arrival in Winnemucca, Sam surprised her with a journey to the Pacific Ocean, fulfilling the dream she'd mentioned during their earliest conversations. They left the children with Sarah for a week and traveled west by train and then stagecoach to a small coastal town in California. Olivia's first sight of the vast, endless expanse of the Pacific moved her to tears. Standing on the sandy shore, the salt breeze tangling her hair, she felt a sense of completion, of having truly come full circle from the frightened, scarred young woman who had stepped off a stagecoach in Nevada a decade earlier. "It's even more magnificent than I imagined," she said as Sam joined her, slipping his arm around her waist. "Worth the wait?" he asked, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Everything important in life usually is," she replied, leaning into his embrace, "just like us." That evening, as they sat on the balcony of their rented cottage overlooking the ocean, Sam handed Olivia a small package wrapped in brown paper. "A little anniversary gift," he explained. 10 years since you came into my life and changed it forever." Inside, Olivia found a leather-bound journal, its pages blank and waiting. "Open the cover," Sam urged with an enigmatic smile. On the first page, in Sam's strong, clear handwriting, was an inscription. "For Olivia, who taught me that true beauty lives within, and whose inner light continues to illuminate my world daily. May these pages hold the next chapters of your remarkable story, which I am honored to share. With all my love, Sam." Tears welled in Olivia's eyes as she traced the words with her fingertip. "It's perfect," she whispered. "Thank you." As the sun set over the Pacific, painting the water in shades of gold and crimson, Olivia reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment, the pain and fear that had driven her west, the courage it had taken to start anew, and the love that had healed wounds she'd thought would never mend. Gregory Wilcox would be released from prison soon, she knew. The thought no longer filled her with dread as it once might have. She was not the same vulnerable, isolated young woman he had marked and threatened. She was Olivia Reeves' now wife, mother, businesswoman, respected member of her community. She had a family who loved her, friends who valued her, and a husband who saw her beauty in its truest form. Whatever the future held, she would face it with the strength she had built day by day, year by year, in the sanctuary of Winnemucca and the shelter of Sam's unwavering love. The scar on her face had faded somewhat with time, but its significance had transformed entirely, no longer a mark of victimhood but a reminder of her resilience, a chapter in a story still being written. That night, as she lay beside Sam in their bed overlooking the ocean, Olivia listened to the rhythmic crashing of waves and thought about the journal waiting on the bedside table. Tomorrow, she would begin filling its pages not with regrets or fears, but with the joy and hope that now defined her life. Her story, once narrowed by trauma to a single defining moment, had expanded into something rich and complex and beautiful. Beauty lives within, Sam had told her on that long-ago day in Winnemucca. Now she knew with certainty that he had been right, and that when such beauty is recognized and cherished, it cannot help but transform everything it touches, healing even the deepest scars with the gentle, persistent power of love.